The Duval Rundown with Hayes Carline and Ryan O'Halloran.
Good afternoon. Welcome into another edition of Duval Rundown. Appreciate you being with us. This is Hayes Carline. Please be joined as always on Wednesday with Ryan O'Halloran, columnist of the Florida Times-Union. Ryan, we've got a new time slot, 3:20 on Wednesday afternoon. I'm excited about it. How about you?
Well, this means Hayes will start the 9:04 show by going this.
That's right. Yeah.
We're all up and ready to go. I've had my nap. I don't know about you, but we're ready with this new time slot and that new introduction.
Yeah. How about that? So we appreciate Tom Champion putting that together for us, and certainly appreciate Jacob Simons, who's with us now and does an outstanding job as the technical brains behind the operation. So we certainly appreciate Jacob's efforts. And we're excited to do this. We'll do this all off season. Again, we're no longer doing the Monday and Friday with Frank Frangie and Rick Ballou. We'll just pick that back up once training camp begins in 6 months. But certainly there will be enough with the Jaguars to keep Ryan and I busy on a weekly basis. And Ryan, let's start with, I know you've got a column coming up on Jacksonville.com in regards to Brian Thomas Jr. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid to swipe an idea or write off an idea. Bill Barnwell from ESPN had a really good exercise earlier in the week, some mock trades, and Brian Thomas came up. It was Brian, fill in the blanks for me, Brian Thomas and a fifth?
Correct, for Keon Coleman and a first.
Okay, from Buffalo. So that sort of was my jumping off point a little bit. But I think the point I've made, and it's going to be online tomorrow and in the paper tomorrow, is this isn't the right time to give up on Brian Thomas. He had a bad year, but he was supposed to be a number one. He wasn't. I don't think he's even a number two on this team anymore. But ride it out. He doesn't cost a lot of money, and maybe he'll, with a full offseason with Trevor Lawrence and a second year with Liam Cohn, maybe he'll uptick his production because it wasn't good last year.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I read Barnwell's piece as well. And I kind of took it from the angle of, if the Bills offered this, I would do it. Mm-hmm. Now I do think, to your point, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. could certainly have a bounce back season. Historically, year 3 was really the big year for receivers. There's been a lot of Hall of Fame receivers. Go look at Tim Brown's first 2 years in the NFL and then look at year 3. And that used to be kind of the pattern, like 10, 20 years ago, is a receiver – really, you didn't really know what you had until the third year. You saw a lot of third-year veterans. That was their breakout season, and they went on to have extraordinary careers. So Brian Thomas Jr. is getting to that third year, which is interesting because he has already had a fantastic rookie season and then a disappointing second year. So for me, it's not so much like I'm writing off Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't think he's a one. I think he's more what we saw this season than as a rookie. So I liked Barnwell's idea just because I feel like you're getting max price for an asset that a year from now you're not going to be able to get like a third round pick for. So a lot of this is gauging, obviously in regards to this, with Brian Thomas Jr., where is the value of this player going? If you believe it's going up, to your point, then you want to hold on to him. If you believe that it is stagnant and possibly even going to regress with Jacoby Myers here, Parker Washington here, who knows? These guys may hit on a draft pick. What if they find the next, Puka Nacua is hard to say, but what if they find another mid-late round pick that shows up and can do some really good things, like the Rams did in the late rounds with Puka Nacua a few years ago. So, for me, if I was the Jaguars and I had a club willing to give me a first-round pick, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the fact they don't have a first-round pick this year, I don't think that's really all that, big of a handicap for them. But to get a first-round pick for a guy that I think does play scared at times, certainly showed it, in my opinion, too often in his second year, I would do it. I don't really care about Keon Coleman. If they wanted to throw him in, fine. That wouldn't be a big part of the deal for me. Mm-hmm. But to get a one that I could then, hope to add a defensive tackle with some pass rush, or an edge, help my defense, help get after the quarterback a little bit with that first round pick from Buffalo, I would be all for it.
Yeah. Over the last 10 drafts, 14 to 13, only 5 of 42 first round receivers have been traded or cut by their team after year 2. So there is patience. Teams have patience because it's such a premium position. And the way I spun it was, if it creates another hole. So does that mean Travis Hunter is a receiver? I don't like the receivers at the bottom of the first round. The Bills are picking 26. And so that was sort of my deal. But I thought Brian Thomas's season basically started to go downhill in week 2 last year. He never got corrected. They like to say, well, he picked up the late in the season. Well, he had a couple of plays, but a couple of stats by him. The average air yards for a target for him, 13.9 yards. He's supposed to be this great vertical threat. It didn't happen. Here's the one that stood out to me, and I did this my own charting. His average yards after catch, 3.3.
Wow.
3.3. And he had 33 of those on one play against Houston in week 3. So that's going to be the challenge. And Grant Udinski alluded to this late in the season is how do you use him? If he's not going over the middle, is he a one-trick pony? Well, then yes. If he's not doing shallow crosses, they know Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington will run whatever route it takes. Is Brian Thomas going to become that player? This should be an awakening for him this offseason that if he wants to get that second contract, which changes his life, he will answer the bell and do whatever it takes. And so that's what the Jaguars should be aiming at. A Godfather offer would be the Bills offer. You would have to consider it. I would take Keon Coleman just so I could move him for a water bottle because he majors in being late to meetings, not scoring touchdowns. So that's going to be a offseason storyline if Thomas is still here. Is okay? What do you have? Was that all a pipe dream late in 2024? Clearly, it was.
Yeah, so far, and again, I just think if you're the Jaguars and you keep Brian Thomas Jr. and then he produces, a 650-yard season next year, well, now you're talking about a guy that, his trade value basically falls off the map because one of the reasons, and Barnwell points this out, one of the reasons the Bills might give up a 1 for Brian Thomas Jr., you still have 2 years of control, plus the 5th-year option, and then a tag. So, if the Jags keep him another year, well, now the club that's acquiring him, they're much closer to having to make a decision on what to do with him, and they don't have that time with him. So to me, it's about maximizing an asset. I don't think he'll ever, on the trade market, fetch more than a late first.
Yeah.
So for me, if Buffalo was willing to do that, I would do it. Unless I believe that he truly has potential to be a very good player, with this administration. But I just don't think. I think he's a nice kid. He's always in the locker room. He's very accommodating, but his lack of toughness for an NFL player, he's tough for a regular person. I get that. But for an NFL player among his peers, he just doesn't strike me as a very tough player.
Yeah, and from the Buffalo point of view, I don't think he's a fit at all. Because that is cold weather. That is, physical. You're playing on grass up there in the new stadium, but I think Buffalo, they should just stay put and take KC Concepcion against Texas A&M. I thought he was a great player this year. Yeah. So I don't think it makes, but the Bills are in really an urgent mode. But my other thought, if you want to wrap Thomas up here, is I don't think they'll get an offer that's any good because people are going to see what we saw.
Yeah. That's what I think too. That's why when I saw Barnwell's take on it, I was surprised the compensation was that high. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Yeah, my guess is Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be here. He's going to be a Jaguar next season. But yeah, if a team calls offering a late first round pick, I would immediately do the deal if I was James Gladstone. Let's talk about Barnwell. Also had another Jaguar trade in there. He had Walker Little being traded to the Browns for, I believe, a 5th round pick this year. And then the Jaguars sent, I think, a 7th in the 27 draft. But I mean, there's not much to break down here. I think if they can get a 5th-round pick for Walker Little, I mean, again, I make that trade and do cartwheels down the Miller Electric Center if I'm able to get a 5th-round pick for Walker Little at this point.
Yeah, it's a salary dump, and it gets his money off the books. My only, I'd say probably about a 9.5% pause on this would be, can they count on Patrick McCarty to stay healthy? And if they can, is Wyatt Milam. If they can't, is Wyatt Milam ready to play, which essentially is going to be his rookie year. So, and also, okay, who's your swing tackle? Walker Little struggled at left tackle. There's a reason why they gave Cole Lannon the job and a contract. But it would say, okay, now you got to prioritize an offensive lineman, maybe higher than maybe on day 2 in the 3rd round. You got 3 of those 3rd-round picks. So, yeah, that one also was noteworthy, and I do think there's a very good chance that Little is moved, and that because he's not a premium offensive lineman, but he's an experienced offensive lineman and a versatile one. And those are tough to find, especially if a guy has shown he has a comfort level inside after playing outside his entire career.
Yeah, I think Walker Little absolutely would have a market. There just is too many teams that just have nothing that they like along the offensive line, certainly not at all 5 spots. So we know how bereft of talent there is, the depth of talent at offensive tackle in this league. They're going to get calls about Walker Little. That was one that made a lot of sense to me. And again, if you're the Jaguars, to your point, it helps you out from a contractual standpoint. Another thing too is I'll be interested in hearing from the Jaguars whenever they decide to meet with media, whether that's next week, hopefully.
Labor Day.
What's that?
Labor Day.
Yeah. I mean, normally we would hear from them at the Combine. We don't expect that they'll be at the Combine. So hopefully they'll do some sort of media next week, just because we're used to kind of hearing from the organization this time of year. But one of the things that I think would be interesting to ask them, but also to hear from them is the confidence that they have that they can take this current 11-man draft class, and how many of those guys they really believe can be guys that they can count on in year 1. Because if they have a high level of confidence that they can find an offensive lineman with one of those 3 third-round picks, because you have to think the 2nd-round pick is going to be a defensive lineman, but they have 3 picks in the 3rd round. Well, that's usually where you can find a good offensive lineman. They went there last year with Wyatt Milam. Brandon Linder in the past was a 3rd-round pick. A.J. Cann was a 3rd-round pick. So this organization has done a pretty good job of at least finding, decent to good players along the offensive line. And this is previous administrations that largely failed. I'll be interested because if you're Gladstone and company and you like the board, how it sets up across the offensive line, particularly at tackle, then I think you're even more apt to move Little, because you just figure, well, we're going to draft an offensive lineman. Even if we still have kind of a surplus at the position, I can't imagine they're still not going to draft an offensive lineman with one of those first 4 picks, which would be in the 3rd round still. So I think that's interesting. Like, how obviously they're not going to have full confidence until they see the draft class. But as they project it and they project who might be there, be interesting to know, is this a group that they largely feel like they're going to need like a redshirt year before they can help them? Or do they have a high level of confidence that they can find some guys that can come in and be productive in year 1 if needed to?
Yeah, I think at the offensive line spot, if they take a guy, they're in position, knock on wood, health-wise, for that person to get time to develop. You could take an offensive tackle as a contingency in case they don't re-sign Anton Harrison after the season. So, that's sort of the way they go. I think they need to come out of night 2 with 4 players. I don't care how they do it. If they trade a day 3 pick to move up 3 spots in the 3rd, whatever. But, a 2nd, 3 thirds. I think they kind of come out of that with a defensive tackle, another edge. And I think I would prioritize running back and also an off-ball linebacker who can play right away. Those 4 guys there's going to be some urgency there because this team doesn't have a lot of powder in their arsenal on free agency right now because of the cap. So the draft's going to be critical for them to find guys who can play right away. Then on day 3, if you really see a guy, and you brought up Linder, is the Jaguars traded up for Linder in the 3rd round because the centers were flying off the board, if you remember.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll wrap up with this, Ryan. Combine next week. Take us through like what that week will be like for you, and some things that people should look forward to on Jacksonville.com and in the Florida Times Union.
Yep. So going up Monday, be there until Friday. So Tuesday, a lot of GMs and coaches, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the players. We had 6 local guys from the Jacksonville area, so I'll try and talk to all of them. But one thing I want to ask some of these executives and coaches are, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pass rushers who play defensive tackle in college football. Okay, so what kind of projection is that? If you have a guy like 330 pounds, does that mean he's automatically a run stopper? And so what's sort of the philosophy in trying to develop interior pass rushers, because it's such a commodity now in this league, and the Jaguars have to get more out of those 2 spots on 3rd down, and that doesn't mean moving Trayvon Walker inside all the time if he's on the roster. So that's one of them. And then the other thing is, I'll give you 2 more as it relates to the Jaguars, is running backs. You got guys who carried 768 times, 622 times in college. Do they have an internal odometer, James Gladstone and company, to say, hey, that's too much tread on the tire, even if they are healthy, to consider them in the 3rd or 4th round? And then lastly is, I think this team needs safety help. And so who are some of the guys that may be on their radar there? But it's weird to go to this thing when the team you cover doesn't have a 1st-round pick, because you really are bringing a bag full of darts with you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we'll certainly look forward to your coverage from Indianapolis next week. I'm sure you'll join us on the Frangie Show as well, which we'll look forward to. And so next Wednesday, or should we plan on Duval Rundown at 3:20, or we'll just play that by ear?
We'll plan it for 3:20 because, as you remember, those are early mornings and early afternoons in Indianapolis. So we'll be ready to go at 3:20 next week.
All right. That sounds great. Well, Ryan, we certainly appreciate, again, watch Ryan, Jacksonville.com, read his stuff, follow him on Twitter at Ryan O'Halloran. Great stuff, man. Have a safe trip up to Indy.
All right, Hayes. We'll see you tomorrow.
That's right. Thanks for watching Duval Rundown. We'll be back next Wednesday. Until then, go Jags.